Let's talk about time as it relates to productivity. Everybody in this business has said at some point there isn't enough time in the day or in the week. And the problem is that the approach here is completely wrong. The issue is not that there isn't enough time. To understand time management, there's only one main thing you need to know. That is the difference between time assets and time debts. Let's look into someone who is possibly controversial, but nobody can deny his level of productivity, and what he's able to accomplish on a daily basis is astounding. And that is Elon Musk. Now, Elon has the same amount of time as everyone else does, 24 hours in a day. Yet, he's a high-powered billionaire and manages to be the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, highly profitable and enduring companies which are achieving things we didn't even think were possible. He's also the co-founder of PayPal, OpenAI, The Boring Company, and Neuralink. Now, there are plenty of ways we can analyze how Elon stays on top of his game, but one of the most important things he does is he creates what is referred to as time assets. A time asset is something that you do right now that will save you time in the future. For example, software is a classic example of a time asset. The general purpose of software is to save time. You build it once and it saves you large amounts of time going forward. Opposite to a time asset is a time debt, which is defined as something you do right now which is going to cost you time in the future. Not getting your car serviced regularly is a large time debt which will cost you time and money in the future. So let's explore these both individually so that you can start to place your daily tasks into these categories. Looking at a time asset, a task performed that will save you time in the future, I can already picture a couple of things that we do naturally in our parts businesses which tend to save us time in the future. So here are some examples. Building charts for quick reference to part numbers. Why look something up every single time like an oil filter and oil quantities when you could simply spend 30 minutes building a chart of the most popular and distribute that to your technical parts advisors? This is a pretty classic example of a time asset. It's saving not only you, but your team time in the future. Well-defined processes. Many people don't realize how to describe the need for solid processes and frameworks. And the answer is actually very simple. We spend so much time building great processes because it saves us from having to rework things in the future. Anything that makes us more efficient and less likely to cause any kind of error in our work is considered a time asset. Also, sales scripts. Never having to guess at what to say to a customer is a great thing. Having a standardized script to follow is a huge time asset for your team. High quality work like perfectly processed paperwork. Payables, packing slips, invoices, you know what I'm talking about here. What happens when you make a mistake on your paperwork? It causes all of these mysterious issues to occur, which are near impossible to trace back to a single invoice or piece of paper. So processing paperwork at the highest level of quality is definitely a time asset task. So now let's review some time debt-based tasks. I'm sure you're already thinking of some right now. Number one is email. The more emails you send, the more emails you're going to have to read in the future. Remember that. This is a classic example of a time debt. Email in our world tends to be the great productivity killer. We're copied on senseless emails for no reason far too often. We'll get into how to mitigate that later on in this course. Another one is operating from straight memory, being the gatekeeper to your sacred and secret processes. That's all fine and good until you want to actually grow yourself professionally, or until you forget a step in the process you've done every day for the past 10 years. Undocumented work procedures and inconsistency is one of the primary ways we can cause ourselves to fall into the time debt category. Having a messy and unorganized office. My fellow parts managers know exactly what I'm talking about. You are in complete time debt mode when you have to shuffle through hundreds or thousands of pieces of paper laying around to get to the one you're after. The same goes for a messy desktop. If you have a super messy desktop and you can't ever find your files, you're causing yourself to spend unnecessary time on things that could have been avoided. So here is the action item after taking this all in. Begin looking at the way you operate every single day. Look at what you're doing or what your team is doing to cause themselves to be in a time debt category. By the way, if you have an inventory variance, there is something happening in your daily processes which is causing a time debt. On the flip side of that, if you regularly cycle count to identify issues before a transaction takes place, you're on the right path, because that is a classic example of a time asset. It's saving you time up front from having to confront an issue as it occurs. Now that you know the difference between the two, I want you to use the download in this section to identify your time wasters and your time creators. This is actually a really great team-based activity, and it can really open up some great dialogue about quality of work and how we can optimize what we're doing to save us time in the future. The main takeaway here is that we want to always increase the amount of time assets we have and reduce the amount of time debts we create. There are two primary ways we can go about doing this. Focus on quality work that does not need to be redone, and automate tasks as much as possible.